coming to the Artist Talks today. I really appreciate and am excited to see such a vigorous group here to hear Chinn and Michael and David Lively talk about their work that was in the exhibition this month. Chinn Wang is going to go first, and here she is.
Okay. Hi, everyone. You want to come in here because the work's actually in here. Hi everyone. So half of you know me, but half of you don't. My name is Chinn Wang, and I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, so I was born and raised here, but I currently live in Boulder, Colorado. And most of the work all the work that's in the white frames are my work, and they're all screen prints on paper. So if you're not familiar with screen printing, you might have heard the word printmaking before. It's a discipline that's based on the multiple, so you're creating images in sort of a repeated series. So, and how many of you know what printmaking is? Some of you. How many of you know what screen printing is specifically? Okay, most of you know, right? So screen printing, if you have like a t-shirt with like an image on it. Like, so this is sort of the commercial version of screen printing where, so most people are familiar with it like on fabric or textiles or clothing, but what I do is printing on paper or on wood. And so all the work that you see in here are all on paper. And so every color that you see is a separate image that is printed separately. So every color is printed on its own. So each color that you see, that's how many layers are in the print. Sometimes they're printed on top of one another, sometimes they're not. So that's kind of the technique. And if you have, I'll answer questions afterwards too. That was sort of like a really fast run over. But the work that I'm showing here is all work that was created in the last, how long have I been in Colorado now? Since September. And it's all sort of inspired by my move to Colorado. I've been paying a lot of attention to the wildflowers in Colorado, mostly due to my mother, who is sort of an amateur naturalist and was very excited about me moving to Colorado and kept asking me questions about what I was seeing when I would go on my hikes up in the mountains. So I started paying attention, and that's where my interest in a lot of this floral imagery comes from. It also started my interest in florography, which is, some of you may have not heard that word. I have not really heard that word, but it's sort of the language of flowers. It's sort of a Victorian era interest where men and women couldn't really communicate their true emotions to each other, or not just men and women, but people in general could not really communicate their true emotions to each other, so they would send each other these little small bouquets called posies, and depending on, oh, this is so perfect, because actually what I'm holding, this is so random, what I'm actually holding, which could be described as a posy, and I'm actually not sure what white roses might symbolize between you and I. I'm just thinking, but you would send a little small bouquet like this to whoever it was you wanted to share emotions with, and whatever the arrangement of flowers would say certain things to that person. So, it could say, I love you, or it could say, I do not love you, please stop talking. Which there were posies that were like that. So, in my work, generally, I'm interested in sort of these sort of coded symbolic languages through imagery. So in my past, I've been interested in heraldry and heraldic symbolism. I've been interested in sort of totems and the way that they build narratives. And so right now, I'm really interested in what flowers and plants can kind of say. I'm also interested in sort of optical and ocular things that can happen with printmaking specifically, and these sort of weird spaces that can be created just by laying something on top of something or laying something into something, and how close we are, how far away we are from the image kind of can change the way that we sort of perceive. So some of you may have not spent that much time looking at these pieces, but there is sort of a heavy dot pattern in the background there, and if you stand close, it looks like this sort of field of abstracted dots, and then you pull back away from it, and an image comes through to you. That I hope an image comes through to you, and I'm really interested in that space, in that space between sort of of recognition and sort of complete abstraction. So there's a lot of kind of current interests happening in this work right now, and I'm kind of working through some things. So it was kind of an exciting opportunity for me to be working on paper again, because a lot of my previous work had been sort of more sculptural and installation-based, printing on wood. So a return to paper was very exciting for me. So I don't know how long that was. Should I talk more? Ken? James? Talk more?
If you want to.
Okay. Okay, let me see. So in this body of work, these two medium-sized pieces were the first pieces that I created. And they're sort of work as a diptych kind of together, but for this show, it actually really works to have them separated because it really makes the kind of flow happen in the space. So that was the first set that I made, and then this series, this smaller series, was actually inspired first by this print, which is called Root System, and it was an edition of prints that I did for a folio exchange when I was invited to be in, where the theme was about connections and systems and mapping and connections between people and places and things. So that's what inspired some of that, what looks like kind of pencil line drawing, but everything is printed. And so that was the inspiration for that big field of mass. Those flowers there represent all the states that I've lived in. And then from there, I created the rest of this series of prints that are about different things, but a lot, I think of this one down here is going to look sort of as a self-portrait, because as you notice, I use the exclamation point a lot in my work, and I think of it as sort of a stand-in for myself, because I think of the shape of an exclamation point sort of, kind of person-like when you're standing up. And I also, think of the exclamation point as something that represents my personality a little bit. So it's become sort of a personal icon for me. So that, I think that was the second one in the series. And then a couple of these healing crystals, I was really thinking a lot about healing bodies, and I can't go into it too much, but healing in general. And then some pieces about home and memory and that kind of thing. And then this series, the last three prints here were the last ones I made for this show. And I talked a little bit about it already, but I used the really heavy dot pattern, what's called a bitmap pattern, or I guess that's what it is called. I use that a lot in a lot of my previous work as a way to sort of introduce a second layer of imagery or content, but also a layer that is sort of unreadable, so that people, that it doesn't have to be immediately recognizable, and that's, you kind of have to dig for that layer of imagery. And yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Chinn?
If you have questions about technique, like I know a lot of people look at, people who aren't artists or who are familiar with printmaking kind of look at these and think like, oh, is that a drawing? Is that a painting? So if you have any technical questions, I'm happy to answer. I wish I had my props. Normally when I have a talk, I have a screen and a squeegee so that you can kind of visualize a little bit, but I don't have those today. So if anybody has any?
The garden there, a photograph that then you treated with a computer?
Yes.
To create this, or did you freehand that?
No, I could not freehand that. The way that you get the photographic, the dot pattern is you take a photograph, and what I do is I take it into Photoshop. Probably a lot of you are familiar with Photoshop. Take it into Photoshop, and I take the color out, and then I use what's called a color halftone filter. There are a couple of different, as people who know Photoshop know that there's a million ways to do the same thing in Photoshop. But the way that I do it is I put a color halftone filter on it, and it turns it into this and I make the dots really big, because you can make the dots really small to make it very photorealistic, or you can make them as large as you want to kind of abstract them out a little bit more. So I choose a pretty sizable dot so that the image is sort of kind of abstracted. So yeah.
How do you transfer that? Is that way too technical to say?
It might be a little, no, I think I can try. So then from that Photoshop image, I'll take that, and through a series of steps, I can put that image as a stencil onto a screen. And then with that screen, I can print that image in any color I choose. So I don't have to print it in a dark blackish tone. I can print it in red, I can print it in blue, whatever you want. But the stencil on the screen, what it does is it allows the ink that I'm pushing through the screen to pass through the image areas, but not to pass through the non-image areas. So it creates a blocking mechanism on that screen. And that stencil will stay on that screen for as long as you want, and then after you're done with the image, then you can strip that stencil off that screen and use it again for a different image.
So the stencil is part of this covering the paper. It's going to be white if you're using white paper.
Yeah, sure. So all these prints in here were created with the same set of 3 screens. So I just like strip the emulsion off of the screen, strip the stencil off the screen, and then apply a new stencil and move on to the next image. So.
You push it through the press?
No, we push it through what's called a squeegee. So it's like a squeegee that you use to like clean off your windshield after you wash it at the gas station. It's like a more advanced, robust version of that kind of, and I'm actually pulling every layer, so my own body is pulling
So
that
there's a little
ink.
bit of technique to
Oh yeah,
apply
absolutely.
the pressure and so forth.
Absolutely, yes. As my beginning screen printing students
That's
can attest to, it takes a lot of practice to get good at screen printing. So, yeah.
Are you composing these digitally as well, or not?
I do like drawings, I'll do little sketches first, but yeah, most of my composition is in Photoshop. So I started with like a one line drawing, like a pencil drawing, like a squiggly line drawing on a piece of paper. And I scanned that in. And then each one of those little messes of lines is actually 3 layers of the same doodle that have been kind of turned and flipped and printed in slightly different versions of this brownish black, but you guys can't really tell, but I do think it gives it a little bit of a depth that it wouldn't have if it was all printed on the same layer. Because even though you're printing onto paper, and it seems like, you know, everything would kind of be flat and lay in the same layer, with screen printing there is a little bit of a physicality that's built up onto the paper with every layer. So there is a little bit of, you know, because the ink does sit on top of the paper a little bit. So yeah, so then I printed those and then I kind of laid out all the other areas in Photoshop and then kind of split them back up and then put it. Yeah.
Something kind of chaotic like those designs, is it considerably more complicated, I imagine, as far as, because when you look at it as freehand, it would seem something that would be relatively natural, but to bring it into printmaking, it seems like it would be relatively tedious to transfer.
Oh.
What is it?
I would say no to that, maybe. Because, you know, I've been doing screen printing for a long time, and I've learned that I'm not the most awesome at registration, so I plot my prints, most of my prints in ways that where reg can be kind of finagled a little bit. So for these, you know, each one of these big clusters is 3 layers that I've already messed with it in Photoshop, you know, so much that it's exactly how I want it to be. You know, I've spent like hours on Photoshop being like, should I turn this like a little more, bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. I do that like forever before this. So the piece is kind of done, you know, like kind of compositionally prior to the printing. And the only thing that's kind of spontaneous during the printing for me is color choices. Like I don't decide on colors until I'm actually printing. I just mix my colors right as I'm doing it. I kind of have a general idea of how I want the colors to be, but I don't really know until I mix that color. So I don't know, just because the lines look maybe kind of chaotic and interspersed in these really complex ways, kind of not really. But I'm glad that they look that way. Because I did want them to look like, I wanted them to look like somebody went up there and just kind of like that. But if you start to look closely, you'll start to see the same bits repeating because it is the same doodle over and over again, just twisted. Yeah.
Cool.